I don't know if anyone can hear me. I hope you can. It looks like my Yeti is talking. It looks like everything else that's supposed to be on is on. So what we're going to be talking about today, we talked a little bit about the Tellest art last week, but what we're going to be doing today is looking at one of the first official art-related projects that we've ever released, which is the Tellest art book, Tellest Visions. We named it that because we thought it'd be funny to roll off the tongue like that, be able to be at like a convention and say like, "You there? You look like you're in need of a new Tellest Vision," and then be able to use the book. Fun fact: the reason that we chose that was because we were at a convention where someone was selling the Necronomnom, which was a cookbook, which just hilarious. So anyway, I'm going to show you really quick what it kind of looks to flip through the book, and then we're going to take a deeper dive into a digital recreation of the book, because the webcam standard definition, it's 720p, so it's not, we're not going to get full definition or anything here. So just going to take a real quick couple of peeks through the book, see what kind of stuff you see in there. We took things from sketch to final picture. So there's a couple of cool things in here. We worked with a bunch of our artists to pull this off, and Francois Juste, who works on almost all of our interface things, he is the one who worked his magic to put this all together to really make it the spectacular little coffee table book that this became. And these, through the webcam, looks at this flip is not doing it justice. I don't even know if it's oriented the right way right now. But what we'll do is flip through a couple more, and then we're going to go to the digital version. So we're going to cut over to regular recording. You're not going to see my face, my ugly mug. We're going to cut over to the regular recording, and at this point you should be able to see the art book intro pages, but we're actually going to take a step back just so you can see a bigger version of the cover, and I'll read the back cover for you. So it's: pull back the veil of the world of Tellest and gaze into the ether. In this strange, beautiful, and sometimes dangerous land, magic permeates the elements, flowing like the wind and offering its gifts in the most surprising ways. Witness history as it unfolds in the grand fantasy tapestry. See the heroes who risked everything to save families, friends, and entire cities. Discover the villains that stood against them throughout their journeys. Learn about the races that populate the world. Uncover the artifacts that helped to shape Tellest at its core. Venture through the forests of Daltane, about the mountains of Crassius, and across the harsh, hot Kahara Desert. Watch the events that heralded change throughout the lands and changed the course of the world. 16 artists used their great talents to bring this amazing fantasy to life like never before. Stow your disbelief and join an adventure by exploring Tellest Visions. Welcome to the world of Tellest. And one of the cool things that we have here is across the screen you can see a couple of the sigils that Francois he designed for us. So this was kind of an idea that we had ahead of time, where we knew that certain things were going to be, built with certain symbols in mind, and certainly things like Game of Thrones with like the dire wolf, the lion, the stag. Those certainly helped to give us the idea that it would be a cool idea to kind of brand each of the cities, the families, the guilds, things like that. So it really gave a lot more of an emphasis. It added a richness to the world, and you can see that we kind of used those sigils as our table of contents markers as well. I'll read this piece as well. There's tons of words in this art book as well, and I don't want it to be a narrative that I read to you, but I will, just because this kind of sets the stage. Welcome to a world of magic and majesty, where the forests and lakes and mountains are touched by the mystical forces of the ether, and great powers are given to those who are fortunate enough to be affected by the phenomenon known as the strain. And I will take a step back there. I say fortunate, but not everybody in the Tellest universe feels fortunate about that. Specifically, we have, for instance, the people from the April's Fools who feel like, their powers are almost a mockery. We have some of the elves of the world of Tellest who feel like getting a taste of magic power and not really being able to fully embrace it. For them, it doesn't exactly feel like a gift. But for people like us who typically don't have powers, yes, it is a fortunate gift in most cases, but it is supposed to be kind of a situation where, in the world of Tellest, they're a little bit like the X-Men. They feel like it gives them an opportunity to be ostracized and mocked and things like that. So for everybody, it's not necessarily a gift. It's not necessarily a chance to be fortunate. Anyway, the world of Tellest is as beautiful as it is treacherous, and as striking as it is mysterious. With thousands of years of history to speak of, the lore of this fantastic realm is long-reaching indeed. Within the pages of this volume, you'll be transported across time, bearing witness to some of the greatest moments in record, from the utter cataclysm of the fall to the emergence of mankind once more in the Great Convergence. You'll venture with heroes as they take up arms against terrible villains, and come close enough to touch the artifacts that help to turn the tide against evil forces. You'll behold the creation of some of the world's most iconic races. This glimpse of Tellest will bring you to the edges of some of the most important events the world is known for, and back again. Depart on a great journey into this remarkable world as the veil is pulled aside. Stow your hesitation and your skepticism, and embrace an appreciation for the uncanny, the impossible, and the imaginary. This is a world of unbridled magnificence and of power beyond explanation. This is a world of endless devotion and unfathomable love. This is a world of tremendous heroics and of legendary valor. This is the world of Tellest. So I did mention briefly there, and I'll talk about this again towards the end of this book, we say in this volume, and that's very deliberate. As I said last week on the Talking Tellest stream, we release new art every Wednesday on the Tellest website. So it's only a matter of time before we work on Tellest Visions Volume 2. We've got plenty of art since then. The reason that we've kind of been holding back is because the stories, I want them to be able to kind of lend themselves to what's going on in this as well. So we're going to wait until a couple more books are finished in order to bring forth Volume 2. But we'll get there. So each one of these, again, I'm not going to read everything. I just wanted to kind of set the stage. Each one of these kind of chapters focus on a book or a series in the Tellest universe. So Tales of the Fall, we put this first because logically the book The Fall and the subsequent books that will come out are from the earliest point in the Tellest universe that we've written about so far. The most important timeline that we've explored is the point at which Tellest breaks into a version of Tellest that exists just with elves and dwarves, and a version of Earth, the one that we're familiar with, where humans were banished to. So Earth is called as such because it was just Earth. There's no magic to it anymore, so to speak. And the Fall was the legendary moment where that happened. So we kind of wrapped in kind of a retelling of the mythology of Icarus into the Tellest universe, and kind of said that that's why the story is the way that it is. So Icarus is the main character within that point of time, because a big part of what happened was due to either him failing or him succeeding in some way. So it gave him the opportunity to play a role that's very important in the history of Tellest. Icarus is hated for a very long while before he's given the chance to show his love and his passion for his world, and he's become one of the champions that are most known throughout the world at this point. And he's settled down a little bit, and he's trying to help the next generation of people in some ways, and we've seen that in a couple of stories so far. So we see the cover of The Fall over here, and then we move again to character art on the back. This, or on the second page, I should say. This is his brother Evensar. So far, the character art that you've seen is from a combination of, this is Hosier, also known as Skentz at the time, who worked on this. This was... Her name is escaping me, but I'll catch it at the end. She did 3 pieces of art for us like 6 or 7 years ago, and it just fell through. B. Gonzalez, I believe her name was. This was also Skentz/Hosier over here, and then the cover, of course, was made by Delio Black Leonardo Barazio, who does all of our covers. And then, of course, we just saw a version of this cover a few seconds ago, but we saw it in kind of like the sepia tone. This is the cover for the Maelstrom, which is the sequel to The Fall, which I just haven't finished writing yet. This is a very important book to me, so I'm taking my time with it to make sure that it's done properly. I don't want to race to get it done and deliver a substandard product. So because The Fall was so important, The Maelstrom, which is the follow-up to this, which introduces some creatures that are integral to the Tellest lore, I very much want to make sure that we're doing this right. And you can see the remains of Chandrannar, the once floating continent, which has, since the fall, fallen into the ocean. After that, the next chronological story that we have is the Tinker's Tales, which features Maximus Xanders, and his stories are a little bit more like man versus nature. I tried to use his stuff more as kind of like an experimental project. Rihanna really liked horses, so I wanted to tell a horse story, and I wanted to tell a story that didn't necessarily have a lot of man versus man or anything like that. Certainly there's something in the Tinker's Tale and more in Stealing Sarah Moore, but there's kind of a more nebulous kind of feeling than, just men being evil. So one of the things that you'll know about Maximus if you read the books or if you kind of take a peek at the website every now and then is Maximus is our tinker. He's perhaps most known for creating the clockwork steed Aquinicus. But of course we also have his mechanical mice that he makes, and he's made a couple. We can see that there's two different variations of it here. We do have the Skentz version of the character here and here. He did two different versions of us over the years. And then we have Azot, one of our other artists, did a version of the Clockwork Mouse as well. At some times in the world, the mouse has become known as Merle, but I don't think that that's every variation of the mouse. And then here we have on the right side of the screen, we have the cover of the Tinker's Tale. And on the left side, we have Maximus's first real friend, Richard Lenner, who's a priest in the world of Tellest and one of the people who believes in a singular god over all the other pantheon of gods that everybody else believes in. Richard is a bit of an alchemist. As a priest, he knows how to heal people, but he also kind of on the sly knows how to do some not, I wouldn't say nefarious, but some things that could help him in a combat situation. He's not as well versed as a fighter as some of the other Knights of Virtue or anything like that, but he can hold his own for a little bit. And then of course this artifact here again drawn by Azot. This is the Carbuncle Cure, which is a big component of the entire trilogy of the Tinker's Tales, and it's responsible for and heals a lot of the ills that go along in the Sarah Moore Valley. And this is the cover to Stealing Sarah Moore. So we have our two heroes. We have Maximus over here on the left and Richard over here on the right. And then Maximus's father-in-law in the back here, Salvatore. Salvatore is named after, of course, R.A. Salvatore, who was the author who really got me going when it came to working on my own novels and things like that. I do want to also mention, I don't know that I've ever substantiated this kind of thought inside my head, but I very much believe that that Maximus is drawn to look like Leonardo Barrazio, our artist in this case. I'll have to eventually ask him. The next one that we're going to look at is the Dragonspeaker Saga. This is the one that stars Kayonani, our Kaja from the Kahara Desert, and introduces her to her dragon companion. The idea is that the Kaja of the Kahara Desert, they make a bond with one dragon their entire life. The dragons, because they live so long, it's intended that they will find someone else potentially, but more often than not, if the dragon dies, it has to be a new quest. There's not going to be the original dragon speaker is not going to be set up with the next dragon automatically. So in Kayonani's case, she ended up being chosen by destiny to find Talaris here, who ended up being her dragon companion. We'll see more of her in the future. She's another integral plot point to the overarching Tellest tapestry. So we've got a lot of Kaja art and a lot of Kayonani art. So Paul Davies, he's one of our most prolific race artists. He put together a lot of cool stuff for the Kaja when we were trying to figure it out. At the time, we didn't actually know Kayonani's name. He actually is the one who coined her name. He was the one who came up with the name, and just ended up giving us a character that I don't think at the time that I had any idea that I was going to write a story about the Dragon Speaker. And sometimes your artist delivers something that is so powerful to you that you end up having to kind of take that step. So he gave us a couple of versions of some Kaja down here. It eventually ended up evolving into what we see here, and then eventually over to here before we officially got the name and put her together into her own story. And along the way, a lot of other people have taken a stab at it. I believe we talked about Luigi IX last week, so he did his own take on the Kaja. He did. This is Leo over here who did his own take on Kayonani and Talaris. We had a few things in. So here's the thing. Not everybody is great at anthro characters. So along the way, a couple of times we've had some artists step in to give other artists hands here and there. I won't say who helped who, but I will say that that more than once we've had to have some people who just, tag each other out and give each other help. Tellest is definitely a kind of world that we're not afraid to offer a helping hand to one another to make sure that it shines. We have the back cover of the book here. This was done, that was the back cover of the book. That was done by Delio Black. The piece over here that we can see, that was done by Barnswallow. She is one of our collaborators that we work with even to this day, even though this art was done 6-7 years ago. This was a staff that Kayonani wields that Azot did. So one of the things that you'll notice a lot is we kind of embrace the weird versions of our art. So just because something looks one way doesn't mean that it can't exist in another way. And that's kind of due to, Marvel and DC, they have their multiverses. We kind of have that too. We're fully embracing that as we move forward into the timeline that we're in now. There's been some wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff that's happened, and that's why things like this can happen, where you can see different versions of characters with different powers, things like that. Thus far, we haven't had anybody from different, universes meet one another, but that's not to say that they couldn't. And now we're moving on into the Silver Serpent Chronicles. This is as much of a superhero kind of story as I think you're going to find in the Tellest universe. It was kind of designed to be a bad guy at the week kind of episodic. I almost kind of like saw it as a TV show in a way. Every episode, every chapter was built with a new supervillain in mind, but we specifically tried to make it so that not every supervillain had such black and white motives and things like that. So I'm very proud of the Silver Serpent Chronicles. It strikes a darker tone sometimes, but I'm just very happy with the way it ended up. This is a version of Kelvin Dracos, also known sometimes as Steel Tip, who Hosier did this one, Hosier/Skentz. On the opposite side is his mentor, Marin, also known as the Silver Serpent. You can see here she's not wearing silver attire. That's explained in the book series. This was done by Barnswallow again. We're going to take a look at the cover again real quick. We have a couple of the bad guys that show up in the story here. We've got the Watcher in the back, and we've got I forget his actual name, but he goes by Riptide a lot, so that's why that's what I know him as. And then the Heart of the Forest series, we kind of looped that in as well because that directly links to Kelvin Dracos. You can see, at least at this point, he went by a different name because he was trying to hide his identity. So he actually goes by Marin's last name. Marin was very important to him, so that was kind of the identity that he took. We see an older version of Kelvin as done by Hosier here, and we see Azot does his magic quiver, which produces an endless amount of arrows, almost as if they're regurgitated by termites, I believe I describe it as, known as woodchuck. And then over on the opposite side, we see gremlins made their first appearance in Heart of the Forest, and Paul Davies was the one who brought them to life in this form here. Paul Davies also did one of our most famous pieces of art, this Knoll artwork that we have here. You've seen this before because I know I mentioned last week that the DM in my Friday campaign ended up taking that image and used it as a part of our game. But it's very unlikely that you would have seen the work in progress pieces that Paul did. So he did a great job with these. It would have been one of those situations where I would have loved to have gotten a version of each of these. It's just I don't have the money tree in my backyard yet. Paul also did the first version of Logano that we've ever had, and he did it in a way that we were kind of not expecting, because at the time, whenever we were thinking lizard folk, that kind of thing, we were thinking green. You know, like we have Luigi IX on the opposite side who, you know, cast them in green. But Paul took a different route with it, and he gave our tribal Logano here a neat blue color that has since shown up in some of the Tellest art in the Quantum Quest games. And then, of course, the cover of Heart of the Forest we see again here. So we've seen the gnolls, we've seen humans, of course. This was the first time that you can see the goblins, and then you see the werebear over here in the back. At the time, I don't think that we had any werebear art ready for Tellest Visions, but since then we've added them to the mix. So, next up on the docket is the Dreamwalker Saga. This is the book series that follows two characters, really. It follows Vanathrin, who is one of the elves' surprise werebears. Hello, Flaw. So joining us on the chat is actually our wonderful editor, Nace Flaw. So it's great to see you, Nace. Yeah, werebears, a little bit of everything. We're talking about the Dreamwalker Saga now, so this is no werebears, unfortunately, to be found, but there are a lot of goblins. So the part of the Dreamwalker Saga follows Vanathrin, and it really is called the Dreamwalker Saga because it follows her into kind of like the elven version of PTSD. So I mentioned in a post earlier today on my Twitter and my Facebook, or Instagram rather, that the elves of Tellest, they can pretty much live forever. There's not really a problem with them just kind of perpetually living a kind of cushy life as long as they're safe and no one's trying to kill them or anything like that. But one of the things that they're kind of cursed with, in addition to not really being able to amass as much power as a human or a dwarf or anything like that, is they are prone to a disease called the Dream Plague. And the Dream Plague is something that can kill them while they're dreaming. If they have a tremendous amount of guilt, it can, follow them into their dreams, and it can put them to rest forever. And the Dreamwalker Saga follows kind of like a therapy session, really. It's a character named Maravek, who is the focus in the second book, who helps Vanathrin to understand that the events that she punishes herself for are not necessarily her fault. So we have Vanathrin here on the sepia version of the cover. B. Gonzalez, she did this beautiful artwork of Vanathrin for us, and then Barnswallow, I'm sorry, this is Hosier on the back, or on the right side. He did this wonderful artwork for us, and you can see the sketches to life for each of these in the parchment color in the back. And then you can see her cousin, Naralindra. This was done by June Jensen. Barnswallow did this one over here, and Hosier/Skentz did this version of Naralindra here, and again you can see the sketch to life over here that we got. Once again, you can see the cover of Awake here, and then again, one of our real popular pieces. This is one of our first goblin pieces that we ever had done, and this was done by Paul Davies. He really was the reason that the goblins ended up looking like these big hulking guys that you see on the cover that Leo did for us. We knew that goblins were going to be not presented the way that they are in a lot of fantasy. We wanted a kind of foil to orcs. We knew that orcs were going to be part of the quote-unquote good guys. They were part of the good races in Tellest, so we wanted to kind of give a nice foil, a nice mirror image to what the orcs could be. So while orcs kind of present themselves as like the alt-humans, goblins are supposed to kind of present themselves as like the alt-elves. So you'll see like the same pointed ears, things like that. Whereas the elves have kind of like the up and back. The goblins will typically have like the side and back. We have some beautiful scene art that Hosier did for us. A couple of the last things that he did for us were like these splash screen elements that really came out nice, and you can see he gave us a couple of different sketches to work with, and this was the one that we ultimately ended up using, and this has been one of the pictures that I have adored for as long as we've had it. And then this is the cover for the second book in the Dreamwalker saga. This is Arise. A lot of times what I try and do is kind of keep to the same feeling when it comes to some of this stuff. So we'll go Awake, Arise. The third book in this series is Adrift. The kind of theme that we have with the Tinker's Tale is a little bit of alliteration. So we have the Tinker's Tale, Stealing Saramore. The third book in that series is going to be Racers of the Ring, or Riders of the Ring, depending on how I feel the day it gets published, and so forth. So we only have one bit of city art, and that is Versali Barai. That is the city that we play in our D&D campaign, and it's also the city that Arise takes place in as well. So we've got beautiful art that was done by Tom Mafayan here. It's the only time, again, that we've ever had city art crafted for us. We've brought that into our D&D maps, and we, for concept art, have Delio Black, Leonardo Barazio, our cover artist, to thank for this real quick concept piece that he did for us, and it's been great. One of the characters who was introduced in the second book was Faradorn. He's interesting in that a lot of times what the magic of the elves looks like is one kind of magic ability that's separated into many pieces. So an elf can't really have the full power of whatever his ability or her ability gives them. And in Faradorn's case, that's not true. And the reason it's not true is because Faradorn is the only member of his tribe that is left. And as the members of a tribe diminishes, the power continues to grow. So Faradorn is a very strong elf. He can basically weaponize light. If there's artificial light available, flames, lantern, even ethereal light, he can take that and he can weaponize it. And then you can actually see the fourth member of the troop. This was a picture that was drawn by Regrena. You can see Vandalus, who is the fourth member of the troop up here. And then we're going to move on to the Ancestral Magic series. This is probably the most popular series that we have because you can get the first book for free. The Mageborn book is our kind of Lost Leader perma-free book that you can get on Amazon. It's always up for free, so if you want a nice cheap way to get into the series, that's the best way. So Adelia has kind of become our flagship character because it's so easy to get access to that series. Mageborn is $0. Transformed is just under $1. Wild Magic, because it's such a hefty book, is going to be the first full price book, but when you get the trilogy, you'll get it cheaper than any other trilogy for sure. We have the cover of Mageborn over here on the left. Again, it's become a very popular piece for us. And then on the right, we have a piece of art that was done for us. We tried to work with her since then, and this has been probably like 8 years. This is by Clover Teapot. I wanted to get a lot of other kind of like painterly portrait pieces like this, and just hasn't worked out. We've got some concept pieces of Folly's Glen in the back. This was done by Dina Helmy. And then we've got Horace's version of Adelia on the front. The cover of Transformed on the back. And then we've got some stuff for Gaston. Gaston is Adelia's mentor. This is, I want to say, the most popular picture that we have. I send a lot of DMCA requests to have people stop using this artwork. This artwork does not belong to anybody but Tellest. So I like that everybody likes it, but we have to be protective about it. We need to make sure that people aren't using it for their book covers, for claiming that it's their art, anything like that. It's a work of art and a work of passion that Leonardo did for us, and we want to make sure that it's given the utmost respect. So, and then of course we have this version of our sage back here, done by Hosier, and he is by far, as powerful as he is, he's just into knowledge. He's as much a scholar as anything. So we wanted to make sure that he had his books and he had his scrolls and things like that. So anytime you see him, he's usually got his nose in a book, and he's kind of imparted that thought process and that wisdom to Adelia as well. Adelia is a big studier. She likes to learn about her surroundings. Most likely, plants and herbs and stuff like that. That might have something to do with an accident that happened in Gaston's his study, but we'll let you read about that. And then we're moving on to the Thunder Fury saga. Thunder Fury saga follows a human who was raised by dwarves, Bolt Thunder Fury. It's kind of an on-the-nose kind of name. This character was actually inspired by my brother. We wanted to kind of give him a character that I could write stories about that would appeal to him. And the name Bolt was actually a character that he used, or a name for characters that he used in a lot of fantasy and stuff like that. So we kind of hijacked that for him. Funny enough, by the way, the character here of Bolt looks a whole heck of a lot like my Uncle John. That was just by happenstance. We have a lot of weird stuff like that. We have a piece of artwork that was done by Dennis Van Kessel, who was supposed to be Luca, who kind of vaguely is supposed to represent me, and that looks like my cousin Steven, like you would not believe. So we've got versions of Bolt, both done here by Hosier, and then on the back, we are moving into some other Dwarven art. This was done by Leo as well, and this actually represents Midwinter Requiem, which was a story that was written by Rihanna. We've got the cover of Son of the Storm here, another one of those awesome scenes that Hosier did for us. And then finally moving down here, we see a magic chakram that up to this point, Bolt still doesn't have. He's used chakrams, certainly, but not one that's got this much pizzazz. So like I said before, Azot, he will do some very interesting art for us. And we're kind of like, yes, our heroes are very much superheroes, but our first kind of trilogies for these characters are leading them up to that point. We the kind of way that I start things with is the first book in someone's series is personal. The second book in the story is kind of like, all right, I'm here to save, my region, my home, that kind of thing. And then the third book is where it's like, all right, I'm going to save the world. So we're trying to get our heroes to that point before we give them anything too majestic. And then this is the awesome cover for the Lord of Thunder. This was probably up until Heart of the Forest, this was the book that had the most interesting kind of array of races. So we have humans and dwarves, certainly. Then we added, so we don't call them dark elves in the Tellest universe. They're called delvers. They are subterranean elves and things like that. But they're, we wanted to kind of separate them enough from a lot of other properties where they didn't feel like, they're not dark-skinned. Typically, they're gray or purple. And then we have... This is our half giant back here. They're called Haldrons or Haudrons rather, in the Tellest universe. This is so we had Talaris, our dragon. This is Tempest, our half giant Haudron. He is interesting in that our poor guy up here, strong as anything, really talented blacksmith. Can't see worth a damn. Really needs glasses, and no one is telling him what glasses are. So he really needs some help there. That's not a joke, by the way. That's actually... I found it funny that we didn't have any characters with glasses and really wanted to give him a hard time. We had to have people helping him out in our battle because he just couldn't see. And then, of course, we have the first time that we had one of our flying races. No, I apologize. We had harpies in the first Son of the Storm book. In Lord of Thunder, we introduced Avarians, which are our bird folk. And then we see a couple of different versions of bird folk here. So we have Hosier did his take on Kyoto, who is the central Avarian character from Lord of Thunder here. We've since seen a couple of others. There was a whole roost of Avarians in Heart of the Forest. And then back here we have Luigi IX's take on these characters. We also have another character, Kazuri, who is an Avarian, and Kyoto's sister, I don't think is in this book. No, I lied. So this is Kiri, his sister. She is supposed to get her own story eventually too. There's just not enough of me to go around, so she hasn't had her chance to really shine yet. But Kyoto is on the back here as well. This was Mountain Watch, which was done by Liz Kay. And then, of course, we have Azot's version of the mithril spear that was used to attack the frost giant here. Although maybe things didn't go the way that they were supposed to. Anyway, the other creatures that we introduced in Lord of Thunder, because Lord of Thunder, as much as it is about kind of exploring other races, it doesn't always mean that they're good races. And in the case of Lord of Thunder, we introduced the Naga. Now, the Naga here are kind of like an aquatic version of the Naga that you would see in the Tellest universe. Probably not the kind of Naga that fought against Bolt and his allies in Lord of Thunder. But we certainly set out to get concept art of what a Tellest Naga would look like. This fits the bill, just maybe not necessarily the territory or the region of the world that story took place in. And then we're moving into the last 3 books. Actually, I apologize because we also have Tales of Tellest at the end of this. The Child of the Stars trilogy is the first trilogy that we've ever completed. We're actually 10 years out from when the trilogy was completed, and as of next month, we should have the second trilogy finally wrapping up with the Ancestral Magic trilogy. And it's fitting that it's Adelia who is getting that story wrapped up, because the Child of the Stars trilogy focuses on her brother, Chaos, who in the new timeline is Luca. So this is a version of the cover there that we have. We've got a version of Chaos here. A lot angrier, a lot fightier in the old timeline. He's seen here wielding his magic sword Wildfire, which Azot captured over here as well. This picture over here was done by Hosier. We have another one of those B. Gonzalez pictures here. This was the final one, and probably the most popular one that we had, because she captured the fire from Alicia Main so wonderfully here. Like, it just, I don't think that we have another piece of art that pops as much as this. She did such a fantastic job with this. It was well worth the wait, I'll tell you that. Then we have Barnswallow's take on Alicia here and Hosier's take on Alicia up here, and you'll see a lot of similarity in the art pieces here. She's got a heart here, not a piece of heart here, but same kind of thing. And that is the heart of Arias. It's one of our artifacts from the world of Tellest, kind of important to the overall structure of the world, and it has a part to play as much as the characters do. We'll say that. We have our first map, which was done, our first continental map, I should say, which was done by, oh God, I'm blanking on his name, but it's in the back of the book, so we'll actually see it before we close out the book. We've just seen so many different versions of Draconis over the years that it's causing a blank in my brain box right now, but we will hit that again in a second. Hosier also did this. This was I think the only other non-character art that he's done for us. He did this version on the right, certainly. He kind of looks like Master Splinter here in this picture and a couple of these other ones. And then he ultimately ended up giving me this one over here on the left as a Christmas present, and it is by far one of the things that I treasure to this day. Dirk at Peace is one of my favorite pieces of art, and it makes a great poster, I will say that. And then, of course, one of the big bads of the Tellest series has been Juramontato. He's a necromancer, and he's the reason for a lot of characters' grief in the Tellest universe. So we have 2 very talented artists, their take on the character here. Over on the left, we have Hosier's take, and then over on the right, we have Leo Black's version of it. Leonardo gave us this full background version that we've used for Halloween stories every now and then because it really pops. And then we're looking at some other bad guys mixed with some good guys too. So we have Prodigy here, who, as of the original series, was just kind of a big guy. His name was kind of ironic because he really wasn't that smart. He was just the big galoot. But that could be changing in the new series, the new timeline. And then over here on the back, we see Alicia again, beating up on some skeletons, using her fire magic to just tear people apart. And that was the last scene that we had that was done by Hosier. And now we're seeing, again, some of our characters from the first book in the Child of the Stars trilogy. This is Essex over on the left side and his son Rathley on the right. And if you see Rathley and think that he looks just about as old as Essex, that's by design, but you have to read the series to find out why. And then, of course, we move on to the second book in the Child of the Stars trilogy. This is, again, another one of our most famous pictures, just because Leo captured these dragons so immaculately. This is, of course, the villain of the book. This is Scar. And then we've got 2 other dragons on the left side. We won't say what their names are because that's important to the story. Scar really is, like, right from the get-go kind of, described as the villain of the story. And as a bonus, he shows up in Mageborn as well as Adelia's kind of first quote-unquote task. That was kind of a nice little nod and Easter egg, though. He's not supposed to be like a super villain for her or anything. And then, of course, another one of our famous characters, we have Lila here, who is very popular amongst the people who have read these stories and just has lingered with them for a long time. So we've got a barn swallow version of the character over here, and she's recently done another beautiful rendition of the character in kind of like one of our portrait styles. So that is, I think, up on the Etsy store now if you want to see that. It's not yet graced the art gallery because at this point we get art from our partners quick enough where we can throw them on the Patreon, we can throw them on the Etsy, but once a week the Tellest website kind of moves slow. At this point, I'm scheduled through the rest of 2023, and we're moving into 2024 for drafting and things like that. So we're making a splash. And then, of course, we have a couple of other characters who were introduced in the second book. We had a brief kind of like nod to Eclipse in the first book. He looks really short compared to Retris here. I think that's just an affectation of the art itself. You know, he's about as tall as Retris. Nothing too crazy there. Retris, of course, is a character who was introduced to be a villain, and I always thought that villains in a lot of fantasy were just kind of one note, and he starts off, with a task of, fighting the main good guy, and then just kind of realizes, like, this isn't really what I want to do. Like, forget all this. Yeah, and he has very good reasons for wanting to, bring the fight to the good guys. And he just recognizes that war is war. It's not, what it's cracked up to be. There's no personal vendettas or anything like that. And he realizes, well, I won't spoil it. We'll leave it at that. We'll let you make your own decision about why things ended up the way they did. And then, of course, Pendrich here, Pendrich of Arix. He is one of our coolest, in my opinion, villains. Again, a lot of gray to him, not a lot of black and white. His armor and everything, very black, but his personality, there's a lot of nuance to it and everything. And while he has these very dark, foreboding, powers, and he's got this immense strength and everything, I feel like I did a lot with his character. I did a lot with his character in the second book, and then he ends up showing up in the third book, and I get to do some pretty cool things with him as well. And then he's known for the raven-winged helmet that he wears, which is why he's called the Raven. So Azot kind of captured his helmet over here in a cool little, almost Witch King-like style. And then Pendrich is the general of the army, but the Prince of Blacklane is this gentleman, Sherner Fowler, who is very much your Conan the Barbarian, Kull the Conqueror kind of barbarian who just wants bloodshed all the time. So he's adorned with skulls and this giant greatsword and everything like that. And he just really wants to get up in the good guys' faces and really screw with them. And then we're moving on to the third book in the trilogy. This is The Enemy Within. We did a lot of focusing on chaos in the first two books for the cover. Realistically, we probably could have done that for the third book, but I wanted to experiment a little bit and take the focus away from chaos. I don't know if I would have done that again if I had the foresight of being able to go back, but we focused on a couple of the other characters in the third book, and that was starting off with Christopher and Steel Tip. So you can see Steel Tip offering a hand to Christopher down here. They were always a duo that I really liked seeing together, so we kind of put them together in this third book, and we had a lot of fun with that. So we see a couple of the other characters who make up the 9. We have David Garris here, who is wielding these 2 giant axes. He was notable for being a character who had a really cool power that was discovered in the first book. At this point, 10 years out, if you're watching this video and you're trying to get more information on the story, I'm going to spoil it for you in the next 5 seconds or so. So if you need to, stick your fingers in your ears. David's power was that he was bulletproof. Any projectile that came after him just stopped dead in his tracks. But he had an interesting weakness as well in that he was... I'm forgetting the word, but he bled a lot. If someone scratched him, hemophiliac, I think. If someone scratched him, stabbed him, whatever, there was a good chance that he was going to bleed out. Lucky for him, he had a friend with a flaming sword, so that ended up working out for him a lot. And that's kind of why you see a lot of scarring here and everything like that. And it helps that he was a pit fighter as well. A good pit fighter, hence never having bled before any of the real big battles with Blacklane. And then over here you have a couple of our other characters. You have Christopher Linus, who we saw on the front cover of The Enemy Within just now, and we have Anson the Bard and a couple of the other could-be art that we could have had Hosier do for us. We ultimately liked that style, which was style B. Although you can see like certain things we didn't keep the hat with the feather or anything like that. And then we have Hokeland of Crescentshire here. He's more often captured in like black attire, but here we've got just your kind of little bandit highwayman look here, and I don't really know if his eyes are white or yellow or anything here, but typically Hosier's known for two things. He's got a power and he's got a really cool weapon. So his power is that he can kind of steal the vision of somebody else. While he's looking through somebody else's eyes, he can't see, and he can kind of travel with them indefinitely. So he uses that power in some interesting ways. To the best of my knowledge, The Bindings of Fate came out certainly after the Game of Thrones books, but before the series, where when people were warging, their eyes would go white. So I think I beat HBO and George Martin to the punch there. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. The other thing that Hokeland is known for is this sword over here. And you might think, okay, he's got a bronze or copper sword. That's kind of interesting. No. He actually has a wooden sword. And you'd think, hey, that's really stupid. And the people who think that are the stupid ones, because this sword is vampiric and it's indestructible. So if you think, oh, I'm just going to catch this in my hands or something, you are going to be pulling back a severely screwed up hand. So don't mess with Hokeland. Actually, we have a couple of other pieces of art that you'll see on the Tellest art gallery that didn't make it in here because I couldn't talk to the artists early enough to get their blessing to get the art in here. Certainly when it comes to Tellest Visions Volume 2, we're going to push for that a little bit harder because there are pieces that are missing. So we want to make sure that we get that in here. We have some kind of straggling pieces here. In the Tellest trilogy, or the Child of the Stars trilogy, we do have one orc show up, and it was a very human and elf and dwarf-centric series up until that point, and we kind of... I stepped away from that in a big way as I started to work in the novellas and what has grown to be like the new timeline, because Tellest is supposed to be a world that's much bigger than humans and elves and dwarves. So we had Paul do this amazing rendition of an orc for us. He did a lot of tribal stuff. They're not all like this. We've got a couple of pieces of art. It was very hard for me to say, don't do a version of this orc who looks sagely and smart and knowledgeable and things like that. When he gave me a sketch like this, how was I supposed to say no? And then a big artifact dump. So we've got a couple of artifacts here. We've got a lot of chaos stuff here. So we've got the Wisp Mail over here, the Ring of Amplification. We've got the Sky Talon, which is a really cool grappling hook that just locks in midair at the wielder's request. You can tell that my voice is starting to go. Give me 1 second. We call this guy the Smoke Marble. Really is what it says. It just Chaos will throw that to the ground. It'll erupt into a plume of smoke, blinding everybody. He rushes in, collects the marble, beats some people's faces, and kind of moves on. And then we have, of course, the Iron Kiss, which is a kind of leather glove that you can use to unlock any chest, any door, anything like that. It just kind of is like a master key. And then we're moving on to a couple of the other things that we have. We have Sepulchre's Claw, which is that wooden sword that I mentioned earlier that Hosier has. So this is kind of freaky because depending on what timeline you're in, this could be one of two different gauntlets. So we have Violoth and Astaroth. And each of those gloves represents two different things depending on what timeline you're in. One was kind of an offensive glove, one was a defensive glove. But in any case, it was very integral for a point in time in the world that really shaped a lot of what happened, and it's a big component of what's going to happen again in the new timeline. So this has always been like one of those key pieces that needs to be paid attention to. And over here we have the Spectrum, which is a magic bow that Steel Tip received in the Child of the Stars trilogy. There are technically 2 different versions of this as well. One version of it enhances the wielder's vision, and one version of it doesn't really require arrows, or it enhances arrows if they're put on the bowstring. And then we circle back round to the cover of Bindings of Fate. And here we see a lot of our characters, from Rathley to Essex to Juramentado, all in kind of different color schemes than we had seen them before. And then we see Steel Tip, / Kelvin, Adelia, and Chaos. And then we move to the Tales of Tellest. These were our first short stories, so we're going to look at this as well. This brief snippet, the sepia tone that we see on the front, doesn't give us a lot of details, but we do see Rhys Oberon, who is very important to the overall Tellest tapestry, and we'll talk a little bit more as we see more of him. But first, we're going to take a look at a couple of the short stories. These pieces of art were done by Chimera. She's done a couple of character pieces for us as well, but these were the cover quote-unquote pieces that she did for us for The Littlest Kobold and Remembered in Gold. I didn't choose to have them rhyme, that's just the way that it worked. We've got a couple of other characters here who've shown up in the world of Tellest. Again, we have Rhys Oberon over here, who his main conceit is that he's stupid enough to try and steal from a god. So he ends up taking one of these things, which is an Orb of the Void, and tries to take it out of the void, and it ends up shattering and sends him cascading through time. It opens up a lot of cool things for the Tellest universe and lets him travel to things that are outside the tried and true events that we've seen before. And he gets to explore things and kind of sets up the rest of the Tales of Tellest, because the Tales of Tellest is supposed to kind of take you away from your tried and true heroes. It's supposed to bring you to places you've never been before, to explore new things, and that expands beyond just me. It helps us to loop in other authors. So we've had other authors who've lent their hand. In fact, you should see that in a second, but as a point of fact, one of the things that you'll see here is Leica and her golem. Leica is a character who was developed for us by Aaron Canton. Hosier did this piece, and he did this piece over here. This one over here is of Conrad the Blessed. Again, a misnomer. He is no longer blessed. He is cursed out the butthole. And his whole thing is he's kind of been taught all his life to heal and to protect, and he doesn't really have that ability anymore, which kind of offers an interesting juxtaposition on what a cleric is. Not quite a shadow priest or anything like that, but at least as close as you can get, if it's not your choice. And then we've got other characters. Another character here who was done by Aaron Canton. This was June Jensen. Nope. June Jensen's one of our artists. This is JD Rivers. June Jensen was the one who did the art here. JD is kind of like a minor druid in that she can kind of coerce plants to do the things that she needs them to. So that's why you always see her with flowers and vines and stuff like that. She's a thief in the Thieves Guild as well, so she's kind of known for doing some pretty cool stuff. We've got Hosier's take on her over here, and we've got Barnswallow's take on her back here. And then we're moving to Zoe Hart. Zoe is a second-generation hero. She's a child of one of the Knights of Virtue, along with Alicia Main. Zoe is kind of our street-level hero, and while we haven't told a story specifically about her yet, that is the idea, is that she is kind of the one who's protecting the streets of Adelatha, typically at night when nobody's paying attention to the little guy. So we've got a June Jensen piece up here, a Hosier piece up here, and a Barnswallow piece over here. That is kind of the way that it goes with us. And then, of course, the beautiful cover of Tales of Tellest. In here, a little closer, you can see the various things that we worked on, and that is the covers of all these other books. So you can see The Tinker's Tale, you can see Awake, you can see The Fall, you can see Mageborn, you can see Son of the Storm, and then you've got those two quote-unquote covers that Chimera did. You can see The Littlest Kobold, and you can see Remembered in Gold. These were redone by Leo to make sure that they fit the same style. We wanted to make sure that we had consistency on that front cover, or on the Tales of Tellest cover. And that brings us to the end there. So we have looked at 134 pages or so. We looked at a bunch of very, very talented artists, and we looked at some really cool art for the last 55 minutes or so. So I hope that you enjoyed what you saw so far. Robert Altbauer, by the way, was the one that we couldn't remember the name of for the Draconis artwork. Since then, we've gotten art for every continent in the world of Tellest. So for Tellest Visions 2, we've got a lot to show for certain. And then I will read this afterward because it'll be a nice way to close this out. And right after I'm done reading this, we will go to our until next time screen. But let's get to this. The world of Tellest, first introduced in 2011, found new life 3 years later when the first artists who filled these pages began lending their talents. The black and white world became colorful and vivid with their spectacular gifts on display. Their collaborations with our growing team continue to make this world more interesting. We thank the artists whose work inspired this fantastic tapestry and allow us to explore new stories and new mediums. Gratitude should also be given to you, our watchers and the readers, for filling Tellest with joy and excitement over the years. The world of Tellest has grown and evolved thanks to your support, and new paths continue to open that would have seemed impossible at the onset of this undertaking. Keep your eyes on Tellest over the years, and you will certainly be swept up in new surprises. If you have enjoyed the striking and diverse artwork upon these pages, then know that the world of Tellest continues to grow every week. The art gallery on our website is home to hundreds of art pieces that display various characters, artifacts, races, and scenes from the book series and beyond. A new artistic production is unveiled on the website every Wednesday. Come join us there at www.tellest.com to see more art each week. Thank you for embarking on this journey through the history of Tellest. It would not be the same without you. Remember, at Tellest, the world is in your hands.